The seers of India had long ago seen this necessity for the help of the highest and the ultimate spirit for uplifting man to higher levels of consciousness and awareness, such as superconsciousness and absolute consciousness or experience. Supermind belongs to the region of the levels very much above the human mental and overmental. These are the levels of being. There are levels of being such as Pindanda, Brahmanda, Parabrahmanda, and the highest transcendent, which is called by Sri Ramchandraji of Shahjahanpur as the central region and the central. Indeed, we can reveal the parallels between these and the words described as Bhuho, Bhuaha, Suvaha, Maha, Janaha, Tapaha, Satyam. Consciousness at each level is at a higher is a higher suited to the plane of its being and goes through modifications or twists and limitations when it descends lower and is thus said to form a several centers or granthis or chakras that distribute the power of consciousness according to the laws of the centers which emerge as and when the center forms. So, ಇದು ಅರ್ಥ ಆಯ್ತಾ? So consciousness is kind of becoming more and more subtler as we go from one loka to another loka. The same thing, the consciousness is actually becoming more subtler as we move from one point to another point. And the power that is there flowing in the consciousness is distributed according to the rules of the center after the center has been formed. So, who forms the center? It's the nature which forms the centers, the chakras, for the gradual descent of the power from the center to the human being or the life form here. The yoga of self-realization demands that the approach to the highest state beyond all the levels of consciousness and being. The question arises whether this is possible, whether it's not a gradual process or ascent which enables man to proceed from the level of man to the level of superman with a supermind and so on till the highest level is reached. This is the second question. So there is much said to be in favor of the gradual theory of evolution. The immediate possibility of arriving at the highest stage is also open to the human soul that has become aware of the urgency of its attainment and existence. This is what Ramchandraji assures as possible, and by the yoga directed by one who has attained that ultimate central reality, it is positively easy. Evolution of the individual becomes swift even while in the human body, which is purified by that highest consciousness or power and transformed in every one of its cells. Underline ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬೇಕು ಅದನ್ನು. Evolution of the individual becomes swift even while in the human body, which is purified by that highest consciousness or power and transformed in every one of its cells. The power of the highest can descend thus into the human heart and begin to purify and lead to the highest state. The human frame itself is so made as to receive the transmission of higher energy or Shakti divine at several centers corresponding to the cosmic and the supracosmic regions. The human body, being thus purified in its nervous, circulatory, and other system, can enjoy and experience the peace, the power, and the transcendence even in this body. The need and the process are really to be trained by an adept in Raja Yoga path. Sri Ramchandraji, in this book entitled Commentary on the 10 Maxims of Sahaj Marg, elucidates the conditions which are necessary for realizing the ultimate. They are maxims which one must follow implicitly. They are not merely orders arbitrarily given, but clearly explained in order to show their rationality in respect to the goal that has to be achieved. They are, of course, easy to follow when there is an earnestness to reach the goal or the ultimate. The simple formula of prayer gives us our objective in the search. It is God who is the All Master and who is the only person who can lead us to the destination. Our wishes interfere with our reaching the destination and are prapti virodhis, enemies of our attainment. Surrender to God, who is the high power omnipotent, is the essential need, and the God is both the means and the end. The master who leads us to the highest is one who is so much absorbed to the ultimate that he is, as it were, God in descent towards the soul that seeks and strives and struggles for help. The ancient methods of practice are beautifully explained, showing the rationality of worship and meditation at the Sandhya or the conjunctions of the day, morning, noon, and evening. The angas of the yoga are also neatly expounded, and the natural method of spiritual adaptation and adjustment to the goal is given as a simple and straightforward manner. The purification of the system by the subtle process of transmission by the master is an achievement that can find no parallel in the recent spiritual history. To live in God, for God, and by God is the burden of the path of Sajmarg. So, to live in God, for God, and by God is the burden of the path of Sajmarg, and this naturally leads to realizations of one reality in God, for God. So, too, one becomes harmonious with all without any distinctions. The higher worlds open up to one who has become one with God by living in Him and for Him alone. Spirituality is not like religion, just a form of worship or technique of observance. It is a living in the awareness of God in His essence. Underline that. Spirituality is a living in the awareness of the God and in His essence. Sri Ramchandraji points out that how the individual soul, by following the maxims of 10 Sadhma, can even at the first contact come to experience the peace that passeth understanding and then grow in this peace towards the highest possible to man. Liberation or moksha is something that naturally follows from this practice. Perfection too may be open to one who is divinely directed. There is a little amount of metaphysics or physics in the exposition which it is not very important to discuss as it will become clear as one proceeds on with the Abhyasa. There is no doubt there must be complete transformation of man's nature and he must be taken up for guidance by the cosmic and the supracosmic nature so that his attainment may be felt to be more and more reality. As one approaches the center or the ultimate, one increases in his reality and all that went before him appears to be more and more unreality. However, the Abhyasi's aim is to gain this increasing reality that arises as one begins to get near the center. So now there is this concept of two realities in Upanishads, relative reality and absolute reality. In our system, we become more and more real as we go higher and higher. So yesterday, I think there was one quotation from Daji, that the world shows what is normal, human beings, something is there. Yesterday, there was that quotation, but the heart shows what is real. What is that quotation? The first word?
The world defines what
The
is
world defines what is normal and the heart defines what is real. So, the more you focus on the heart, the more real you actually become. In other words, our alignment to the reality becomes more and more. Ultimately, we go towards that highest state of reality, which is called as the absolute or the center. So, how does this occur? What we actually do in our system is that the lower centers come under the influence of the higher centers. The higher centers come under the influence of the divine centers. The divine centers come under the influence of reality. That's how we progress. So we don't struggle. It's like the student comes under the influence of a particular set of teachers. Those teachers are themselves under the influence of some other higher teachers. And those higher teachers are in touch with the ultimate. So, in other words, the lowest person or the people at the lowest level, which is the students, gradually get the help of all these people over the course of the time. That is what happens. Okay, so it's not like we are striving to go towards the higher points. It is that the higher points actually are influencing our lower points and making us eligible to reach the higher point. That is what happens. So, for example, when we bring the condition of the Brahmandi mind onto the individual mind, the individual mind gradually acquires the nature of the Brahmandi mind. That is what happens. So, you bring the lower centers under the influence of the higher centers. That's how the training proceeds, and that's how it happens pretty fast. Otherwise, it will be very slow. So, this is the technique that is used in our system. Okay. And it's the masters who bring the condition of the higher into the lower. So, for example, when the individual mind is given a taste of the Brahmandi mind, the individual mind automatically now starts feeling or being pulled towards the Brahmandi mind. That is what happens. So it sees that that Brahmandi mind is something very finer, more subtler than the individual mind. So the individual mind naturally feels pulled towards that particular Brahmandi mind. So likewise, We are given a taste of something higher and then we move towards that. So we go on moving to the higher and higher as we proceed. This is the method of training. So bring the lower centers under the influence of the higher centers, bring the higher centers under the influence of the divine centers, bring the divine centers under the influence of the reality. Okay. There is no doubt that there must be complete transformation. Ayatollah. Sri Ramchandraji's discovery in this realm are remarkable for their dynamic practical nature. God is not far and distant but very near and ready. Means Siddhopaya, and man has but to turn towards him to feel his presence and his power of transformation. We owe it to Sri Ramchandraji of Fatehgarh for making this experience possible at all, and to Sri Ramchandraji of Shahjahanpur for spreading this gospel of redemption and transformation by demonstrating it practically to whosoever turn towards him. This book is, in a sense, for the advanced participant, but it is a very illuminating book which should be read after the study of Master's Reality at Dawn and Efficacy of Raja Yoga. So we have studied the Reality at Dawn. We are now in between the two books. We are now studying the 10 maxims. But wherever necessary from information from the efficacy of Raja Yoga will be given. So not to worry about it. So Babuji writes a word. In this book, I have endeavored to put in words those spiritual secrets which have up until now come down from heart to heart. But since they relate to direct perception, which depends upon the study of nature and can be revealed by means of vibration, it is not only difficult but almost impossible to express them adequately in words. So he's giving what is the method of training? Direct perception, study of nature, and it is revealed by the means of vibrations. So three things he's saying. It is by direct perception that we proceed. We proceed by studying the nature and we get the answer in the form of vibrations. True love cannot be expressed by words. This is the very reality which is inexplicable in any way. In this respect, I may therefore say that it is proper for the readers to try to reach up to the real spirit, ignoring the defects of expression and language, and be profited and help others to be profited by it. So, not to mind the language and other things. That's what he's saying. So, any questions? We have finished the foreword, we have finished the A word also by Babuji. So, any questions? Or can we now start? Shall we start? So, Maxim 1. Rise before dawn and offer your prayer and meditation at a fixed hour, preferably completing them before sunrise. Have a separate place and time for seat for meditation. As far as possible, develop the habit of sitting in one and same place. So, in pose, give special attention to purity of the body and mind. So, generally, they don't expect you to by heart the maxims. You just need to know the gist of it. Okay? The fire of the divine, which has been burning since the beginning of the time, has not yet cooled down. When the time for creation came, the latent thought came into action and the subtlest particles got heated up. Thus, the preliminary covering set in from the very first day. By the effect of the continued heating, the particles begin to come into motion. Its intensity went on increasing, adding wheels after wheels to it. Grossness began to develop by the effect of growing intensity of the vibrations. The action of every particle started and went on multiplying till the reality was completely wrapped up within like this silkworm in a cocoon. In other words, only the white shell of the egg remained open to view, while the reality within was lost to sight. Poor relationship began to spring up. Now, one who was more closely attached to it received more of it for his share. So this is about the creation. So the fire of the divine, which started the creation, is still burning in the background. That is what is actually making the creation still expand. As we know, the universe is still expanding. And apparently now the scientists say that the universe is expanding at a accelerated pace now. Okay. So what happens to the universe in due course of time? When the universe expands to a certain level where the glue to hold things in place finds it insufficient to hold the thing all the things in the universe in place, it collapses onto itself. That's what happens. So the universe starts at a particular point, expands, then it expands in such a way that things are held in place. But after a certain level of expansion, they are not held in place by the same glue which was acting earlier. So at that phase, the universe collapses onto itself. Now, this collapse is what is called as Mahapralaya. So there is uh, evolution and then involution. There is evolution and then involution. Now, scientists feel that, like a star, when it collapses, it goes into a dark matter. Likewise, when the universe collapses, it goes into a dark matter. Now, the dark matter remains there as it is for some period of time. And then, after some period of time, it again starts expanding. Okay? This is exactly the kind of thing that Upanishads talk about in a different language. That Brahma has, like we have day and night, Brahma also has day and night. So during the day he creates, and during the night, everything is quiet. So to say, everything is immersed in darkness. So this happens for Brahma after every day, like we have every day, Brahma also has every day. And the duration is given in that particular website, which I told earlier on in the other book, the Encyclopedia of Authentic Hinduism. If people are interested, they can look at that. Okay. So in other words, there is expansion, there is light, and then there is again collapse, and then goes back to total darkness. Then, so Upanishads talk about what was there before creation. It says, darkness enveloped in darkness. That is what was there before creation. Now, when you talk about this, it only is talking about darkness and then the expression of the light, and then again back to darkness, again expression of light. But then reality is beyond light and darkness. You remember that we read? Reality is beyond light and darkness. Now, the creation comes from darkness, but what is there beyond that darkness? That is the reality. That is permanent and unchanging. That doesn't change. That is the base. Okay. Now, when our mind is only focused on these two things which are changing, darkness to light and then light to back to darkness. When our mind is engrossed in these two things which are changing all the time, we are hoodwinked from something which is beyond, which is the reality. So, our job is to direct the mind towards that which is beyond light and darkness. That is what we learn in our system. Go towards that which is beyond light and darkness. So when we give the suggestion, the source of divine light, we are now going towards the source which is beyond the light and the darkness. Okay, does it make sense? So whatever world that you see is the expression of the creation. So there is light everywhere. You can see that everything is shining. There is light. But then when the universe collapses onto itself, everything becomes dark. So that darkness is, but then that is not our goal. If you take the darkness as the goal, then we are again missing the point. Our job is to go beyond the light and the darkness towards that which is the base for everything. And that is the reality or the source or the center or the absolute or the ultimate. Okay. So what happened then? So the fire of the divine, which kind of led to the creation. How did the creation start? there was a latent thought which came into action, and the subtlest particles got heated up. So again, the scientists are wondering about which are the particles which actually formed first. So now they now talk about hydrogen and helium are the two elements that came into existence first. Now gradually the particles continue to get heated up, and then as and when you continue to get heated up, the covering started settling in on the particles. By the effect of the continuous heating, the particles began to come into motion. So initially they were all static. Now they start showing some motion. Its intensity went on increasing, adding wheel and wheel. So there are three. There is the heat, there is the motion, and both of these things together add more coverings. Grossness began to develop by the effect of the growing intensity of the vibrations. Then now the fourth one. Initially, there are particles that get heated up. Then once it is kind of heated up, it gets into motion. So step by step, there are the, you can say, subatomic particles, whatever you want to call. It is just called as particles. Now you can talk about particles at any level. Sand is also a particle, grain is also a particle. So everything is a particle in that way. You can take it from the biggest to the lowest, smallest. But then the biggest has not yet come into existence. What you have is the smallest particles, the subatomic particles. Now, what people call as boson particle or quarks or anti-quarks, there are so many particles now, subatomic particles. So these particles started getting heated up when the fire of the divine started its work. When it started getting heated up, the particles started showing motions. Now, when the particles started showing motions, the intensity of the heat started increasing, and then there was coverings around the particles. Now, grossness began to develop, with the growing intensity of the vibrations. The particles now, since they are in motion, they are also showing vibrations. The vibrations then become the reason for the grossness. That's what we read in the heartfulness way. You remember that initially, when we like or dislike something, the initial vibration is felt at the C point, C sub point. Then if the intensity of the vibration is more, it travels like a wave to the A point, B point, or the D point. Now when it goes to the ABD point, what happens is it creates vibrations there. Now the intensity of the vibrations at the ABD is dependent on the intensity of the vibrations at the C point. Now the intensity of the vibrations at ABD is higher if the intensity is higher, intense at C point. Now what happens? The vibrations which are now excited at the A, B and D point now gets evaporated, and they become grossness and get deposited at other chakras. This is how we form the samskaras. Okay. So it's all based on vibrations then gradually going on to becoming grossness. That's exactly what Babuji is now talking about here also. The vibrations go on to create grossness. Grossness begins to develop by the effect of the growing intensity of the vibration. Even now, if we lead a life in such a way that our likes and dislikes do not create intense vibrations, then we are not going to create any grossness. We are not going to create any samskaras. It is the intensity of the vibration that gives rise to the samskaras. Okay? The action of every particle started and went on multiplying till the reality was completely wrapped up, like a silkworm in a cocoon. In other words, only the white shell of the egg remained open to view while the reality was lost within to sight. Co-relationship began to spring up. The one who was more closely attached to it received more of it for his share. Now, these two lines, just keep it in mind. It's very difficult to grasp whether when he says correlation begin to develop, is it begin between particles, between atoms, between two life forms? We don't know. He just says correlation begin to develop. It could be at any stages of the development of the creation. Now, one who was more closely attached to it revived more of it for his share. So, in other words, the more you become closely attached in that correlationship, you get a bigger share of that. Now he is now talking about the heat. Now this is something that we need to grasp our mind with the concept of the heat. Now, if you go back to this particular paragraph, we talked about vibration, we talked about grossness, we talked about heat, we talked about motion. So there are quite a few things that we have talked about, and the wheels or the coverings. So the coverings are formed because of the heat and because of the um, motion. Remember, heat and motion gives rise to coverings. Vibrations gives rise to grossness. Heat and motion gives rise to coverings. Vibrations gives rise to grossness. Just remember that. Because when we understand this, how to actually unravel or how to go back to the source becomes easier in our mind. Okay. Now the heat which existed on the first day manifested itself in man, and gradually it went on developing, assuming the form of organic growth. Now, there is this theory in Christianity that life form evolved over a period of days. On different days, different life forms evolved. But what this is now talking about is even on day one, heat, man was there. The heat which existed on the first day manifested itself in man, and gradually it went on developing, assuming the form of organic growth. Even now, when we have to see if the person is alive or not, what we do is we touch the person and see whether there is heat. If the heat is not there, that means the person is gone, right? So you are looking for that original heat even now to see whether it's actually there in the life form. Every particle got affected there by absorbing its due share of it. A material tinge was thus introduced into it and it remained subject to the influence of that which it was part of. The bigger layer previously formed by the heat maintained its connection with it. Now the influence caused by the greater thing will naturally be reflected on the smaller thing which will get impact affected thereby in proportion to its magnitude. Now, this particular paragraph again is something very subtle and difficult to grasp. Now, he's talking about so many things, and it's we have to get our head around what is it that he's actually trying to say. But the essence is it is the heat that is actually giving rise to the organic growth. That is the essence of it, the first line. The heat which existed in the first day manifested in man and gradually it went on developing, assuming the form of organic growth. That is the most critical part of the sentence in this particular paragraph. Now, obviously, the heat impacted every particle thereby, and each of the particles started absorbing the effect of the heat. So, for example, if you heat water, if you heat milk, if you heat anything, it starts absorbing the effect of the heat into itself. When the effect of the heat is absorbed into itself, a material tinge is now introduced into the particles. So now you have a clue. If you want to decrease the materiality of our existence, we have to decrease the heat. That is the clue. How to decrease the heat? The more we actually go on heating the system by putting things from outside, the more materiality is actually getting introduced into the system. The more you actually decrease the heat from the external sources, then you can gradually start decreasing the impact of the heat. What do you mean by that? Decreasing the impact of the heat means decreasing the material hue of our existence. When the material hue of our existence gets decreased, then what happens? The our ability to perceive the reality starts opening up. In other words, we become more subtle in order that we can actually perceive something far more beyond the materiality that we think we are. Does it make sense? So we need to work on the heat. Without working on the heat, there is no question of you developing that sensitivity to catch the subtler essence that we have. Okay. So when the heat influences the particles, the effect of the heat is now partaken by the particles, and the particles undergo the change. And this change is what is called as the material tinge. Now, the bigger layer previously formed by the heat maintained its connection with it. Now, the talking about is there is the heat, there is the particle, there is the heat, and the particle is getting heated up by this heat, and there is a material change introduced into the particles. Now, the heat layer maintains its connection, so to say, in the words that the reality is also there, the heat is also there, and the introduction of the material tinge because of the heat is also there. All the three are there now. Now, the influence caused by the greater thing will naturally be reflected on the smaller thing, which will get impacted thereby in proportion to its magnitude. So now he's talking about if you are to looking at it from a particle perspective, he's also now looking at it from a grander perspective of the cosmic. So if there is heat in the cosmic. He explained it in the level of the particle level. Now you look at it, it is happening at a very grand scale. In that grander scale, the heat is actually forming a very big layer. Now, the smaller particles also start getting impacted by this heat from the bigger layer at the cosmic level. So there are two levels of creation happening simultaneously, one at the cosmic level, one at the atomic level. So both are happening simultaneously. So the atomic level, the smaller one creation, is getting impacted by the bigger creation at a grosser level. Or when I say grosser level, it's a bigger level rather than a grosser level. So two things are happening in terms of creation, one at a atomic level or particle level, other one is at a cosmic level. All things being subjected to external influences are affected by the rays of sun in accordance with their capacity. Now he is talking about the influence of the cosmic on the individual. Now he is talking about the sun and its rays. All things being subject to external influences are affected by the rays of sun in accordance with their capacity. The heat produced by external causes begins to exhaust itself after some time, and the real comfort comes only when it gets completely exhausted. So, when the effect of the heat gets reduced, then we start feeling comfortable. As long as the effect of the heat is still there, we are not very comfortable. That's why, if the temperature increases beyond a certain level, we turn on the fan because we are out of comfort. So, when the heat increases beyond a certain level, we are out of zone of comfort. But when the heat comes back to its normalcy, the real comfort comes in. Take the case of summer season. When the effect of the external heat, which reduces after some time, is thoroughly removed, some comfort or ease is definitely felt or experienced. That's exactly what happens in the morning and in the evening. The intensity of the external heat is reduced. That is what happens. Okay. Now I'll stop here. So, uh, any questions you can ask?
Yes, well, you spoke about that heat, which is the external, which makes it more. The reason is when you say material, is it a thought or is it the what we intake is as a food?
Both.
Both. So thought is subtler than what we intake.
Correct. But what we take influences the thought. It influences our emotions. Because Upanishad says that our mind is also another body only. We call it a subtle body. So the food that we take influences the gross body, the subtle body, and the causal body, all the three bodies.
So there is a reason why normally people who are in this path, no, they keep very light and having food. And the second question is the reality which you mentioned. So by nature we have this experience of reality within us, but we are not able to access it. Is that correct?
By nature,
We know the answers, but still we are not able to access it.
See, the reality is there in everyone. As I said earlier on, we actually turn our mind only to the things which change. We don't turn our mind and attention towards that thing which is in us, which is unchanging, which is the reality. So that's why you need to remember the definition of reality. The definition of reality is permanent and unchanging. So there is an element of that which is permanent and unchanging in us. We do not pay attention or towards that. Our mind is always engrossed on that thing which are changing all the time. So when our mind is now directed towards that which is permanent and unchanging, the mind starts getting metamorphosized by that particular thing. Gradually, the mind becomes more and more capable of directly perceiving that reality. Initially, the mind is not capable of doing it. So as and when it turns towards the reality, it gradually metamorphosizes its habits. The wandering habit is given away, then it settles down at one particular place, and then it further metamorphosizes to become capable of perceiving the reality. So the reality has to be perceived directly, not indirectly. So when there is direct perception, there is no question or doubt in your mind about the reality. Okay?
So, so it's right to say that rather than we learn from some books, with our experience, our own experience, we can learn things.
Exactly. The more you actually become sensitive to the experiences that you pass through, the more you actually pick up. So
And you also,
one important skill that we need to have is awareness and practice to experience, and then gradually develop subtlety to pick up whatever we are actually passing through.
so that is how Babuji was able to bring this book and all to us.
Correct.
And the final question, you spoke about the Brahma's time, the day and night, which in the night normally we call it as a pralaya. So at that time we are still there. Uh, we can still experience that, or we are not there.
We are there, but we cannot experience it. It's something like when you go to sleep, what is it that you experience? You are there, but what are you experiencing? Very similar. In the Brahma's night, we don't experience anything because we are all dormant, so to say. Okay?
And it is for everybody, right? I think my understanding is below whoever is there below Brahma, everybody has to
Correct.
uh, cannot express it.
Correct.
But how could Babaji was able to bring this experience?
Bring those experiences. What experiences?
The way he expressed it, that no, after when he goes to sleep, Brahma, what happens after that? Um, and when he gets up again, everything gets started again.
That is the Yoga Nidra that we read. Do you remember? In Yoga
So
Nidra, you are at the depth of your subconscious while again being aware, alertly aware. So that's why the practice is necessary. Practice of meditation is necessary. With the practice of the meditation, you become aware even during sleep. So that's how you are able to kind of go through it. So you remember the difference between meditation and sleep is both places you go to the same place in both the things. But the thing is, in meditation, you are aware and alert. In sleep, you are not. So since you are awake, alert, and aware, you can pick up things that is happening in meditation. Now, as and when the meditation expands, you go into a meditative state. Now, what is meditative state? In the meditative state, you are awake, you are alert and aware, even during sleep. So you are able to pick up because you are already in the know-how of what happens during the meditation. When that whatever things happen during the deeper states of our existence, we will become aware of it. That's why developing the Awareness and alertness with meditation is of paramount importance. If you do not pay attention to the aspect of alertness and awareness, then many things will actually elude us. Okay, look at the concept of yoga nidra. That will give you a clue on what you asked.
Thank you.
Bharat has disappeared. Sudha sister has disappeared. Only two of you now. So Sudha sister is now going to the kitchen to do some things. Right? So it's getting late, 7:20. Okay? No
Evening.
problem. We will catch up tomorrow morning as usual at 7:15. Just ponder on these two pages. Whatever we read today, just ponder about it. There are a lot of clues regarding what we have to do as far as our journey is concerned. Okay? Bye then.
Thank you. Thank
Have a
you.
good day. Bye then.